Learning Perek Beis Halacha Vov. Churi habayis hatachtonim v'elyonim, the holes that are found in the house, the upper ones and the lower ones. We're going to go down to the Peirush Rambam, and here we're going to discuss places that don't need to have to be checked, when one has to check storage places for wine and oil, and where beer is kept in Bovel and Eretz Yisrael, and Bedika of a base Knesses. So we start off Chori Abayis, holes that are found in the walls of the house. Chori Abayis, holes that are found in the walls of the house. The bottom ones that are found Lamata, Ve'elyonim, those are found above, and the roof is a small house next to the big house. Ve'reves Bokor, and where animals are kept, Ve'halulin, where you raise tarnagolim, chickens, with umatvin, where you keep a storage of straw, oitzus yayin, and oitzus yayin, shemen, and shemen she'enim mistabig mehen, that one does not use them. Ubayis, in the house that you have in it dogim gedolim, I guess they used to raise fish in it. And you don't need to check them, only if they are elam kein ichnis lahen chometz, unless he knows for sure that he uses it from time to time. He walks into there with chometz in his possession. Aval oitzes shecho, but storage houses of beer, but oitzes yayin, where you store wine, shemestapik mimenu, that one does replenish that which he needs during a meal. Ubeis hamelach, where you keep salt. Ubeis hashava, where you keep wax. Ubayis, in a house of dogim ketanim, which are used all the time. Ubeis etzem, ubeis hamorayis, and a house of bones, and a house of certain type of fish with oil. V'chorei abayis hamtzoyim, and the holes that are inside the house. Ukiyoitzev elu, and others similar to that. Tzrichem bedika, they need checking. Shestomon, usually machnisin lohem chometz, one would bring into them chometz during the meal. V'myoda bevadai shaloi hichnis shom chometz, that he did not bring in chometz. Eino tzorach beodik, he does not have to check it. When he checks the cellar, he does the two outer walls, which are the upper ones, and that which is below it. The Gezer Mishnah brings from Rashi himself from Chesed Aleph. The Chori Abayis, the upper and the lower ones means that are very low, and Al Yoina means that are very high, because that which is in reach of your arms, then for sure you would use them. But since they're so low, they're so high, you might not use them. Therefore, one does not have to check them, because you don't have to be choishish that they went into them chometz. So obviously, we're talking here about the low ones when there are no children in the house. Rabbeinu Manoach brings the opinion of the Ravid that there's no chiyuv to check only in a house where there's no children. But a house that has children, obviously, even b'chorei habayis, the low ones, because they usually go in there and maybe they put something there. And from experience, you'd find that the upper ones too, if they can reach it somehow, they'll get there as well. Rabbeinu Manoach explains furthermore, shegaga yitzia, the roof of the outhouse of the house that is outcropping from the building, even though it's not a low place, since it has a incline, you don't have to check it, because it's not easy to use it. In other words, this was an area you could reach, but because things will roll off of it. But other roofs that are not at an angle, then you do have to check the roofs because people put things on their roofs. And so Rashi writes in many places that the roofs of Eretz Yisrael were flat, and only the Gage Yitzia, which was the outer part, where the entranceway of the house was at an incline. But in Europe, where most of the roofs are inclined because they have to get rid of the snow, therefore he explains that other roofs were not in an incline except for the outer one. Rae Gann adds that only the gag of the entranceway doesn't need bedika, but the rest of the yitzia, that room needs to be checked. It was a small room that was in front of it or behind it. It needs bedika because it's easy to use. As we learn in Bava Basra, that the entranceway and the house, they're a place of usage. It's a place where people reside. And lulin, when it says the word lulin, that's where you raise chickens. U'Matzah is a place where you keep straw. Now, what do you do with wine storage houses and oil? According to the Rambam that's in front of us, oitus yain, oitus shemen, that he does not use, means that since oitus yain, I mentioned before oitus shemen, that when it says she'enim mistabik mehem means that the oitus shemen are not used, because only oitus shemen, she'ein dark, that it's not customary to take from there, doesn't need bedika. So the Ravid asks the question, Amar Avram. Avram says, Torah b'shemen, if you made a mistake with oil, that even she'aval pisha mistabik ain't tzorich lefi sheyesh keva l'sipukoi. That the Rambam, when he points out the storage houses of oil, is not correct in the fact that people prepare the oil before the meal, they don't go there during the meal. However, wine, people might drink more than he thought they would use. And the Ravid feels that the din of using someplace for replenishing is only by wine, because he makes a mistake in the calculation. Furthermore, the Ravid says that from the Rambam it would seem even storage houses of oil is only when he's not using them for replenishing. And he asks that shemen, once you're using it for a specific meal, you know from beginning how much you're going to use, there's no reason to suspect that he won't use, he may have had to at one point in the year to go into the storage house to bring more oil. My Mishnah says that this kush is only according to the Girsa she'oitus yain was written first in the Rambam to oitus shemen. Therefore, she'enim mistak b'hem, which he does not utilize them for replenishing, is referring also to oitus shemen, so the storage houses of oil. But the Maggid Mishnah says the correct text is that first it says oitus shemen and afterwards oitus yain. That one does replenish from there, and therefore she'enim mistak b'hem does replenish is only referring to yayin. The oitus yayin, oitus shemen, or the oil storage houses, is even when he does use them throughout the year, doesn't need bedika, because as was pointed out before a meal, you know how much you need beforehand. Furthermore, proof to this would be what Rambam writes in the continuation. But beer and oitus yayin shemistapik. Now here he again mentions oitus yayin, that one does replenish, and he doesn't mention oitus shemen. He doesn't mention the storage houses of oil that one does replenish, would seem to prove that the girsa, the text should really that Ravid had was incorrect, and therefore he assumed that this is what the Rambam meant, but there's actually no disagreement between the Ravid and the Rambam. The Kesef Mishnah at the beginning wants to say, like the Maggid Mishnah, that b'shemen there is a certain amount that is used, and therefore you never have to worry that he went in there in the middle of the meal. But he continues that you can say what we have in the text we have, even in the anointed shemen, it's only when he's not using them, it doesn't need bedika, but when he does need them, they need bedika. Is according to the Ran, who writes the Svaros Harif, since now we're noyig to light with oil, and therefore the storage houses of oil were not only for food, they were also used for candle lighting. And it could be that he'll feel he needs more light, and therefore in the middle of the meal he'll go in to bring more light. Thus we have to worry that he went in there with chometz, and therefore he has to check it. So the Kesef Mishnah says, what the Maggid Mishnah asked the question, if, according to the Rambam, he does include Oitus Shemen because he does replenish from there, why doesn't he mention it? If he differentiates that when you don't replenish, you don't have to check, you should say that when you do replenish, you do have to check. It must be that he's specifically saying only when you do replenish from them. And therefore, if he doesn't replenish, he doesn't have to. And even if we'll say that he doesn't mention the storage houses of beer that one does not use, because we're only talking about a storage house of beer that one does use, we can explain that since the oitzes of oil, the storage houses of oil, are mentioned in the Gemara, therefore, when he does not utilize them, that's when it's mentioned. And therefore he didn't mention, as we said many times, the Rambam uses the language of the Gemara. He doesn't mention those storage houses which he does replenish from, because that's understood by itself. But according to our minhag, that we bring oil in the middle of the meal for the lights, certainly one has to check it. Now, the beer that he's talking about is not beer that was chometz, because that's obvious that you have to sell it, to get rid of it. He's talking about beer that was made from dates, from other items which are not chometzdik. The Kesef Mishnah says further, he wrote this, the Rambam wrote this in order not to mess up the text, but really, certainly, Divrei HaMaggid Mishnah are correct if the words can be made to fit into his explanation. Rabbeinu Menorach explains answers the question of the Rae Gann, and the Gemara, we find that the storage houses of oil that one does use do not need bedika, because he explains that he does not replenish, that you don't light from it. Therefore, accordingly, he knows to begin with how much oil he would need. And you don't go there in the middle of the meal to take out more oil. But certainly, in a place where one does light from it, it's just like wine and needs bedika, because for lighting, one can never say one has enough light. But when they were using candles, some go out, some the areas you need to go into, more people come, not like today where we have electricity. They continue, Mamshech, to the Rambam, when he says that you don't replenish from there, he's talking only to Oitzes Yayin, like the Maggid Mishnah. So we have a raya from what the Rambam doesn't mention Oitzes Shemen that you do take from there. Proves that there's no difference between Oitzes Shemen, whether it's a place where you keep wine or oil. In every situation, you don't need bedika if you do not use it to replenish. At the end, Rabbeinu Menorach says that the Rambam says that Oitzes Yayin and Shemen that he knows for sure that he does not replenish, doesn't need bedika. And so you have especially each one, the oitzes. And if you'll ask why doesn't he mention it later, that if you do use from there, you do have to oil from, or you replenish oil as well, you have to check it. So Rabbeinu Menorach says there's a Guisa in the Lashon Rambam that does have it as well. And according to that nusach, there's no question at all. Hamigdalois has a text like ours. The Oizer Shemen is talking only referred to when he does not replenish from there, and like the Riv says, and he points out that this is the Girsa that we find in the Gemara in the Middle East. Ramach, in his editing, argues that from the words of the Rambam would seem that where you store oil, that you do replenish from, you do need to be checking it Erev Pesach, that you didn't by forgetfulness bring in the Chametz. Still, in the exact svarim that we have according to the Rambam, and as the Migdalois brought down from the Girsa of the Svadit. Thus we see the Rambam admits to agrees with the Ravid that if you replenish from the oil area, you do have to check it. But if you do not replenish from there for lights, only for food, which would not be done customarily, because by food you know how many people are going to come, then you do not have to check it. But if you use it for light, you will have to check it. Now we come to the idea of storehouses of beer in Babel and Eretz Yisrael. So Rae Gann is talking about the storage houses of beer need bedikah. In the Gemara, it would seem that Bovel they need bedikah because they used to use beer, and there was no set amount to how much they would drink, so people would go in there. As we mentioned, we're talking about beer which is not beer from wheat, from hops, but rather beer from dates or something else. But in Eretz Yisrael, they don't need bdika because they don't like the beer as much as they like it in Bovel, and they know how much each person is going to use it, and therefore they wouldn't go to replenish it in the middle of the meal. The Magen Mishnah cites Ubeis Dogim Gedolim. Where's the source that if you have large fish, you don't have to check it? It's a Brais im Sochim Beis Dogim Gedolim Ein Zohar Bedika. Because when it comes to large fish, you have portions for each and every person, whereas small fish, then by small fish one would possibly go there in the middle of the meal to get more small fish for the people because he doesn't know how many they'll eat. He doesn't give portions. Rabbeinu Menayach brings down that those explain the exact opposite, that large fish are chashuvim, and you don't take too many to begin with because you don't want to spend money without reason, and therefore sometimes in the middle you'll have to go back and get some more. However, small fish are not that expensive, and therefore you would take many. You would take from them before the meal, and you won't come back in the middle of the meal to get more. So we have two opposite concepts. Rabbeinu Menayach cites that those storage houses don't need bedika only if he brought into them chometz, which is the language of the Rambam, is found in the Yerushalmi in Sochem Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph, and we don't use chometz even if it's very very high. You have to be boidig because he knows you brought their chometz. Rabbeinu Menayach says Beis HaMelach. What does it mean? The storage house of salt and or of wax. You bedika because in the middle of the meal you'll bring more salt, you'll bring more light candles. They didn't have electricity, as we said. Rabbeinu Menayach brings down Beis HaEitzim needs bedika for the same reason, because maybe it'll be cold or you'll need more fire to heat up the food. The Magen Mishnah brings down when he checks the basement, or the storage place, he has to check the two outer rows, which are the upper rows, and the ones that are below that. As it says in the Mishnah, Beis Hillel will say two outer ones, which are the upper ones. Rav says that it means the top rows that are underneath the roof and the one below it. Shmuel explains that it means the entire outside row and the one that follows it. In the Brisa, Rav Chia agrees with Rav, and everyone agrees with everyone else agrees with Shmuel. And the Rambam paskins kerav that the two upper rows are the ones we're talking about. The upper one that's near the ceiling and the one below it, because that's where you would get it from. You wouldn't grab barrels at the bottom. The Rosh cites they were going in the paskin like Shmuel because all the other Tanoim are like Rav except for Tanabe Rabchia in the Brisa, and he explains that Rambam and Rabbeinu Yoina, why do they paskin like Rav if there's not that many who agree with Rav? Because every Brisa that was not learned in the Beis Medrash of Rabchia are not musmochos. However, those Brises that Rabchia learned Kirav, you don't have to worry for sure. He learned like to the other Brises that are like Shmuel, because they are of a lesser legitimacy than that which Rabchia said. Because the Mishnah brings down that Rabbeinu Manoach asks, why does the Rambam paskin Kirav? In the Gemara we paskin like Shmuel, and he says, it must be, he says, that he did not have the text Hilchos Shmuel. What's with the base Knesses? The Yerushalmi Sorim Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph has a question whether Botik Nesias need Bedika, because on Shabbos and Shiridoshim you do bring in food. Rabbeinu Manoach explains that they would bring Chametz Besudos, and for Kiddush, Achodesh, for the other Sudas. So Rabbeinu Manoach says that the Machmir, whoever's Machmir to check it, Tovei Brocha, and he adds furthermore that the Botik Nesias, that they make Sudas, but those that don't make Sudas, you need to check anyway, because of the young children that come, and people give them all the different types of things, and they hide it, and it could be that it's there. And he adds further, since the light is very great, and the shul they had a lot of candles, therefore you can do it according to the light of the shul, and they had big windows. But you should be doing it at night by the candlelight. And furthermore, there are nicks and crannies where the light does not reach there, and the Rambam doesn't mention this because it's a question of Yerushalmi. Only legavi Botik Nesias that they make sudas, and we don't make sudas in the Beis Knesset, he says. Rabbeinu Manoach asks, why did the Rambam left out what was brought in the Gemara, that if there's a bed in a room that separates two halves of the room, and underneath it there's wood and stones, and it's high, it doesn't need bedika, because you don't go but the mita, a low bed, needs bedika. And Rabbeinu Manoach answers what it says in the Gemara needs bedika. Bedika is talking about the bed itself. Since it's high and separates the room, then it's like a separate wall. However, if it's low, it needs bedika, just like any other nicks and crannies in the room. The din is that the chedek habayis that's on one side of the bed, if people go there at times in the middle of the meal, you have to check it. But if you can't get there without crossing over the bed, and you don't use it for chametz, you don't need to check it. Only and the stone and the wood underneath is also referring to when they don't use the stone and the wood for purposes of the meal. And it is understood, and the Rambam didn't have to mention it, because everything is included in what he mentioned in Halacha Vov. In the Shulchan Aruch, it's brought down in Tuv Lamed Gimel, the Boidik, in all the places that you have to worry, be concerned, maybe they brought Chometz. Mishnah Berurah says that means that you mean Chometz, it means Pashit, if you use Chometz there for sure, but even in a place where usually you wouldn't, but once in a while you would, maybe therefore you have to check all the rooms of the house where you might bring in Chometz has to be checked. Mishnah Berurah further says that even those rooms that person doesn't use, but he just keeps there that of other Jews, the Jews would lend him loans and would receive from him mortgages or loans, and still he needs bedika, because sometimes the person comes in the middle of a meal and the person will go in there with it while he's eating and take it out and help him. And the same thing applies to any other place which might have chometz brought into it. The Mechaber says Oitus yayin, storage places of wine that you definitely do not take from there when in the middle of the meal, then you don't need bedika. Mishnah Berurah says if he knows for sure that at one time he brought in chametz during the year, he has to check it because it's considered a place that he might have brought in chametz. The Mechaber says the cracks of the house and the what's sticking out from the house and from the walls that are not high and not low need to be checked, but those that are very high and those that are very low don't have to be checked. And the Mishnah Berurah again says because Mr. Ali didn't use them. But a house where you have children, like the Rae Gann brought down, then you have to check it. And so writes the Machon Nesher, the name of the Rebbe. The Mechaber says further, Gag Yitzia, the entranceway that we said was sloped, Migdol. And Migdol is a type of box, which was, in other words, it was a tower outside, and the roofs are sloped, and therefore you don't have to check the roofs, even if it's inside the house, because nothing will be left up there. Mishnah Berurah says, flat roof, then would have to be checked, and that's not the case in Europe, as we said, and we learned earlier in the Peirush. Mechaber continues, a barn of bokor, you don't have to check it, because the animals will eat it. Also, a chicken coop, they will eat it. The middle of a courtyard doesn't need checking because if it was chametz, the birds would eat it. But if you know there's chametz there for sure, you have to take it away. And the Mishnah Berurah brings down that when you see for sure there's chametz, you don't rely on the fact that the birds will eat it. Because when you're sure, that cannot change that which is questionable. Mechaber says further, a basement or a storage house where you have barrels, one next to the other, was all full of wine, etc. You have to check only, he says, you check the uppermost one and another one, shiur, until the top. And he doesn't have to check only the upper one and the one below it, but not the entire row. The Mishnah Berurah says only in a storage that he's not sure that rather in a storage place that he takes from there for the Suda. However, if he doesn't go there ever in the middle of the meal, then he doesn't have to. The Bir Halacha, he brings down that the Mechaber said the Halacha like the Rambam, even though and the Rosh who said the Halacha is like Rav, and that's Rabbi Yehuda also feels the same way. But Hilchos Chametz is brought down shiur going, ubnoi Hai going, and the Ritz Geiyus. Rabbi Chaim all say like Shmuel, you have to check the whole front row and the one behind it. The Mishnah Berurah brings down that in Peirush HaMeir even the Rambam also passes like Shmuel, and the Gra see from the Gra with the Yimashma that that's what you have to do, and that's the Das HaRavyo. And since all of these Rishonim are of that opinion, therefore, even though the Mechaber is paskins like Rav, still one should not rely on that, but should check the entire row. The Mechaber continues, but the Gnesias and the Midrashos need to be checked because children come in there, as we learned earlier. And Mishnah Berurah says that you should check that only specifically the night of the Yudalin by the light of the candle, and the Shamish of the Botek Nesias do not have to check that night, only they clean it out the day before, and that's not correct. And therefore, you have to tell them they should check at night also, but they don't have to do to mevatel after the b'dika, even though in Perek Gimel that every place you check it says you have to nullify. B'dika that you do in the Botek Nesias and Midrashos, you don't have to nullify after the b'dika because it's not theirs. And you can't be mafkir that which is not theirs. And if you didn't check the Botek Nesias and Midrashos on the night of the 14th, then you can do it by the light of the open windows, not specifically by candlelight, because the Botek Nesias have a lot of windows and there's much light there, and therefore you can do it by day. But it's preferable to do it at night. If you do it together with your house, then after you mevatel, or if it's a private besmedrish, then you have the right to mevatel, and you would mevatel. And then, Hashem, In the next year, we'll learn Halacha Zayin.